Hello, I'm Bruce Lawton.
And I'm Ken Gordon, and we'll be talking about Buster Keaton's 1925 film 7 Chances. It tells the story of Jimmy Shannon, who inherits a fortune from his late grandfather, but only on the condition that he's married, which he isn't, but quickly needs to be in order to get the money. It's based on a 1916 theater play by Roy Cooper McGrew, whose benefactor was the producer David Belasco. Keaton and his writers, Clyde Bruckman, Gene Havez, and Joseph Mitchell, inherited this play from their benefactor, film producer Joseph Schenck, but Keaton felt that theatrical-style farce was not compatible with his style of filmmaking. For the next 56 minutes, we'll watch Jimmy Shannon run an obstacle course toward attaining a fortune, and Keaton and his collaborators try to run their obstacle course in adapting a very wordy, uncinematic play into a silent Buster Keaton movie. We'll also refer to other versions of the story and premise, both before McGrew's play and after Keaton's movie, to see how they become links in an ongoing chain, and how Buster indelibly Keatonizes the recipe. The adaptation begins with a prologue which is not in the play, but, like the opening credits, was shot in two-color Technicolor. Keaton uses this prologue to introduce his version of Jimmy Shannon and to strategically begin a process of streamlining and compressing the play, stating directly what the play slowly implies. Here we see that Jimmy has a problem. He cannot tell Mary Jones, played by Ruth Dwyer, that he loves her. 1 year passes as they stand at the front gate of her house. They seem to care for each other, but he's too shy to express his feelings. We see the time and seasons pass by the change of weather and also by the growth of the size of her dog. This is the first of three essential plot points that Keaton takes from the play and lines up at the beginning like dominoes set to fall into each other and accelerate toward the climax of the story. The original play consists of 3 acts that all take place in and around one location, a room in a men's country club over a 2-day period. Jimmy is a stockbroker who has never had a relationship nor even been in love. He is a confirmed bachelor and scared of women. In the play, he seems to care for a woman named Anne Windsor, and she certainly cares for him, but it takes him the entire 3-act play to get in touch with his feelings, to finally wake up and grow up and take responsibility and live. Anne in the play becomes Mary in the film. The prologue shows us Mary and Jimmy are a very potential couple. For the rest of the movie, Keaton and company create a textbook example of how to literally open up a play by externalizing, physicalizing, and cinematizing a narrative line that takes Jimmy out of the country club and keeps him and Keaton busy and on the run. Although the differences between the play and movie might at times seem like day and night, everything that Keaton will add and introduce has a source in the original play. The story's action really begins here, as this intertitle tells us the second important plot point, that Jimmy and Billy Meakin are partners and have been tricked into a financial deal that means disgrace and possibly prison unless they raise money quickly. The way and opportunity to raise that money will soon appear with the entrance of a lawyer, played by Snitz Edwards. In the play, Jimmy and Billy are best friends and brokers, but do not work for the same firm. The imminent financial disaster mentioned at the beginning of the film comes from a dangling subplot in the play that hangs like a sword of Damocles until the end. There, Jimmy has told everyone to invest in Yukon ore because he believes that a large company will buy that stock and ensure a profit. Unfortunately, the company does not buy the stock, it plummets, and Billy Meakin goes bankrupt, pushing Jimmy into a corner and forcing him to make certain third-act decisions. Both plot devices are references to sometimes shaky economic foundations that our finances and economies seem to be based on. The Yukon ore plot might remind us of the 1929 stock market crash that was yet to be for both McGrew and Keaton. Jimmy's bad financial deal in the film is not clarified, but it might be a Ponzi scheme, which reminds us that everything old is new again, and we almost never learn from our mistakes. We are now introduced to the third vital piece of plot exposition. A lawyer has come to tell Jimmy that his grandfather has died and left Jimmy money, which seems like a solution to both his love and money problems. Jimmy and Billy think that he's a process server and try to elude him. It's often pointed out that Keaton constructs his films with a mirror-like symmetry, taking actions from the first half and repeating and building on them in the second half. Here they begin the film with a very simple chase-type scene, eluding the lawyer, which anticipates the great chase that climaxes the film. Forced to take the stairs, Snitz passes one of Keaton's writers, Gene Havez. This would be Havez's last film with Keaton. He would pass away in February 1925, 1 month before this film was released on March 11, 1925. He played a crucial role in helping Keaton transition from short films to features, especially on Our Hospitality and The Navigator. They arrive at the country club where all of the action of the play actually takes place. The chase continues and is extended when Snitz is not let in, as it is exclusive and for members only. The suspense builds wonderfully and visually as Snitz finally shows them that he comes to, hopefully, liberate and not to prosecute. As we watch Keaton deconstruct and reconstruct McGrew's play from top to bottom, it might also be interesting to take a step back and look at previous versions of this premise that McGrew drew from and look at 7 evolving chapters. When George Jean Nathan reviewed the opening of McGrew's play on August 8, 1916, he noted that it was not only inspired by a 1910 short story by Gouverneur Morris called The Cradle Snatcher, but he felt that Morris's story was, in turn, inspired by a play by Charles H. Hoyt called A Black Sheep that opened in New York on January 6, 1896. In our Chapter 1 of the 7 Chances, A Black Sheep, we find the basic template for inheritance comedies that demand some kind of marriage in order to get the money. Its hero, Goodrich Mudd, the last living relative in the Mudd line, is left $2 million by his maiden aunt to propagate both the family and family name, but only if he marries his cousin, Ada Steele, by midnight 365 days later. As they pass a young Jean Arthur, playing a receptionist, our 3 protagonists think that they are alone in a room as they begin to discuss Jimmy's grandfather's will, but they are not alone. The pair of legs just visible to the left belong to the character that gives our Chapter 2, the short story The Cradle Snatcher, its title and plot twist. It's in The Cradle Snatcher that the character of Jimmy Shannon seems to be born. He's an office worker with no great ambition. His grandfather has just died and left him $70 or $80 million, but only if he is married by midnight on his 30th birthday, which is 1 month away. In McGrew's play, which becomes Chapter 3 in this line, Jimmy's grandfather leaves him $12 million, but only if he is married by midnight of his 30th birthday, which is the very next day. McGrew states that 7 is Jimmy's lucky number. Keaton continues to compress and simplify details by making everything in his film a variation of 7. He is left $7 million if he is married by 7 p.m. on his 27th birthday, which is today, and seems to be about 7 hours from now. He will later be chased by what seems like 700 women and then 700 rocks of varying sizes.
I think it's safe to say that Keaton was one of the few actors at that time who can pull off the nonchalantness of revealing his birthday to his cohorts under these extreme circumstances. It's a beautiful thing to behold in this scene, the way he does it. It's just masterful.
As Jimmy first thinks of asking Anne in the play to marry him, so Jimmy in the film immediately thinks of proposing to Mary, which leads to a transition that Keaton often spoke about with great pride. Instead of showing Jimmy get in his car and drive to Mary's house, the scene around him changes to Mary's house. It was another Keaton touch to make the play cinematic. We return to Mary's house and where the opening prologue took place. The conditions of his inheritance now give him a reason to move forward from the prologue and finally tell Mary that he loves her. We also meet Mary's mother, who will soon be very helpful in reminding Mary to keep an open mind concerning Jimmy's frantic situation. As Jimmy rehearses his proposal, Mary and a character referred to in the credits as the hired man played by Jules Cowles, watch him. In typical Keaton fashion, Jimmy has had no problem expressing his feelings to Mary when he thinks he's alone. It's really way too early for a happy ending anyway, and the moment that he speaks to her directly and they finally begin to connect and kiss, he very quickly puts both feet into his mouth. Their interaction, which began so optimistically, ends as he offends her by giving the impression that he only proposes to her to get the inheritance. One foot seems to belong to the familiar Buster character with the pork pie hat, who is shy and tongue-tied, but the other foot belongs to Jimmy, or Buster's Jimmy, who is not quite the guy with the pork pie hat. This scene is important because it's really the heart of the story. Jimmy has had his chance to solve the problem that was set up in the prologue. When he does not successfully express his feelings and propose to Mary, he must now be punished by having to experience the rest of the story. It's similar to the framing structure of Sherlock Jr., where he quickly wins and loses the girl and then dreams that he takes part in a moving picture where he can experience a transformation by fantasizing about a better version of himself. Here, after winning and losing Mary and the framing device, he must learn his lesson by experiencing and participating in Keaton's adaptation and projection of Seven Chances, which will continue until the end finds us back at Mary's house where the proper ending can take place.
You'll notice in the previous title card as well as this one that while we're reading what Jimmy is saying, the underlines indicate what Mary is hearing, which is actually an ingenious way of showing how they're not communicating within a silent film. And that's a credit not only to Keaton the filmmaker, but his gag men and the people that worked on creating pictures like this with him.
Jimmy returns to the club again through Keaton's wonderful camera trick, but I wonder if Jimmy's standing still while the world does the traveling for him also tells us something about Jimmy's character. He dresses well, has an expensive car, and seems wealthy, but also with his wealth may come a sense of comfort, entitlement, laziness, and disconnection. The rest of the film exists to shake Jimmy out of his safe and privileged position, forcing him into a more physical existence as he runs for his money and his life. Keaton confirms Jimmy and Mary's love for each other, but unfortunately, neither Jimmy nor Mary can confirm it to each other. As he solidifies this heart of the film, as he lets them realize how much they care and need each other, he also begins to solidify the farce elements of the story by stopping Mary from connecting with Jimmy on the phone, because Jimmy accidentally unhooks the phone receiver. We'd mentioned earlier that Keaton was really discomforted with the way that he was given this assignment to be in Seven Chances. His producer, Joseph Schenck, had bought the rights from a man named John McDermott, but also hired McDermott to either direct or co-direct with Keaton, all without consulting Keaton. For Keaton, that was a little bit of an insult because he was really used to creating his own material and developing it. Eventually, McDermott would part company with Keaton, and Keaton would direct the film alone, but it really was a forecasting of things to come. What would happen after Schenck? What would happen with Buster at MGM when he was given farce material and not allowed to develop it according to his taste and inclinations, and he was just a contract player? The problem that Keaton had with this film was based on the problem that he had with farce. As he told Robert and Joan Franklin in 1958, "I shouldn't have been put into anything that was a farce because I don't work that way. Life is too serious to do farce comedy." Mary's mother convinces her to give Jimmy a second chance. Because she cannot reach him by phone, she writes him a note to be delivered by the hired man. As Mary has been offended by Jimmy's insensitivity, some viewers may be offended by the politically incorrect character of the hired man. He seems to be the kind of blackface impersonation that one equates with parts of D.W. Griffith's 1915 The Birth of a Nation. Cowles wears stage comedy slap shoes and certainly comes from the medicine show and vaudeville world that Keaton grew up with and loved. He specifically seems to personify the part of Keaton's objection to farce, as he told the Franklins. Farce comedy as a rule is based on a simple misunderstanding or a mistaken identity. There's always a couple of characters in that show, and if they come out and say, wait a minute, this is the case, all the problems would be solved. With the note that Mary gives him, the hired man could easily stop the action, stop the misunderstanding, stop the farce quite early on in its tracks, and bring on a happy ending. But he walks and rides too slow. He becomes not only Keaton's justification for farce, to let the farce continue, but also Keaton's parody of the necessary conditions for farce. Farce needs aggression and even violent action, and it's possible that Keaton is using his own feelings and aggression about having to adapt this play to feed this farce and film. Back at the club, Billy Meakin has convinced Jimmy that he must ask other women to marry him in order to inherit the $7 million, if only to save their business. As they leave the room, we now get a brief glimpse of the young woman who has overheard everything concerning Jimmy's inheritance. And meanwhile, back at Mary's house, Mary unfortunately will have to wait until the end of the movie to find out what her fate is with Jimmy. Finally, after planting the seeds that Keaton has harvested from the different versions of this story, specifically McGrew's play,
we have this panning shot of 7 women. And some of them are the women that are going to be on the list that we're about to see, and some aren't, actually. About 3 or 4 of them he does ask, but the woman there with the compact doesn't figure into it. So they're there symbolically.
And here's our list.
And here's our list. Eugenia Gilbert we'll see, as well as Doris Dean and Bartine Burkett. They're the 3 of note that we'll comment on as they come up.
And Buster is getting ready.
Now, Eugenia Gilbert here, she's probably best known to silent film fans as Charlie Chase's wife in Movie Night from 1929, which is a few years later. But she also worked with Harry Langdon in some of the Senate shorts, early to mid-20s, and worked with Chase at least 1 or 2 other times. So she worked with Chase and Langdon.
And what we're really watching here is Keaton's adaptation. The play, Seven Chances, is, as a play, very wordy, a lot of dialogue, and it really is Act 2. It comprises most of Act 2 of the play, where he not only proposes to the 7 women, but he talks to them about marriage. We find out who they are, why they won't marry him, and we get a little backstories, which we lose here, which is really what Keaton wants to do. He wants to soften some of the edges and really make this into a visual comedy, and hence it becomes a beautiful mime play and in a way a kind of dance. This choreography that he's creating is again, it works with the plot, but it's also visual. It goes from shot to shot, and the compositions are exceptional. And again, we're watching, we don't need words. Billy, of course, is helping his partner out with the help of Snitz Edwards. And poor Buster. Poor Snitz. Okay, I think we're getting ready to find chance number 2.
This is Doris Dean, and she figured in Sherlock Jr. She was the woman who had lost $1, the young pretty girl that Buster ended up surrendering his own $1 to outside the movie theater. But she also was Roscoe Arbuckle's second wife, and she's, if you see her particularly in the close-ups in Sherlock Jr., she's quite a cutie.
And here we've got a beautiful composition, and we've got a little golf scene, which was becoming quite the pastime in the 1920s. Of course, Billy scratches the name off, which is part of the business in the play too. Buster's not crazy about proceeding, but he's a good sport. Which leads us to chance number 3. Now, again, Keaton is constantly translating a play where all of the information is given to you mostly in dialogue. And in a silent movie, dialogue really cannot tell the story. Intertitles can help, but as a director of visual imagery, Buster continues to fascinate and continues to keep transforming it, alchemizing it into visual comedy, as we've just seen. This leads us to chance number 4. Jimmy is reticent, he's a little gun-shy. Billy decides to show him how it's done.
His partner Billy is played by T. Roy Barnes, who was a very kind of energetic, chipper dandy, and I've seen one of his early silents with Colleen Moore, So Long Letty. It would have been about 10 years before this. And classic comedy fans will best know him from W.C. Fields' It's a Gift. He's the insurance salesman who introduces us to the existence of Carl Lafong.
He's looking for him, right?
Yes.
Does he find him?
I don't believe so, but I think Fields comes pretty close to sending him into the next world.
Oh.
Now let's talk a little bit about lovable Snitz Edwards here.
Snitz Edwards was born Edward Newman in Budapest, Hungary, probably in the year 1868. This is his first Keaton film, and Keaton loved working with him. Within a year, they would work together on Battling Butler. Not long after that, on Keaton's masterpiece, The General. Unfortunately, Snitz's scenes from that would be cut before it was finally released. And then a year after that, they'd work together in College.
And then he's, of course, also known for working in such prominent films as Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, a couple of Fairbanks' pictures, Mary Pickford,
Thief of Baghdad, Mark of Zorro, and his last movie,
The Public Enemy with James Cagney. And here we have Bartine Burkett, who is Buster's leading lady in his first completed short, The High Sign, and also appeared in The Haunted House.
She was chance number 5, and he's just gone through chance number 6, and he thinks this is chance number 7, but a mistake. It's Eugenia Gilbert, who was chance number 1. Back to the drawing board. 1 down, 1 to go. Chance number 7.
Nice baseball reference for Buster, ever the baseball fan.
And here is chance number 7, and again, another variation on the theme. We don't quite see him asking her, but we kind of do, and again, a visual photo play. And that exhausts the list. Scratch. It's at this point, though, that the plot really kicks into gear when Billy has the brainchild of figuring a real new way to get a bride or brides to come to help Jimmy get his fortune. Snitz, too, is very concerned, and again, they both want to help their dear friend. And he really is a pal. I mean, we see that. He does care.
Yeah.
And now when Snitz makes his exit, of course, chance encounter with chance number 7. But that's old news. And here's another ethnic reference, which...
Well, Harold Lloyd does this kind of stuff all the time in films like High and Dizzy as an example.
And in a sense, it seems to signify that when he looks in the mirror, he doesn't see himself, he's losing himself in the process. Here again, he's with Jean Arthur as the receptionist, who, of course, is married. Mistake there. But she's also reading the book 3 Weeks by Eleanor Glynn, which is all about adultery. That doesn't stop Jimmy from crossing her off the list. There's chance number 1. And he's back to the Hat Chef girl, who suddenly for him might be chance number, is this 8 or 9 or 10? No, here's another one. And of course, this is going to turn into a bit of a fiasco. A mother with her child. At this point, Jimmy is becoming like Chaplin in modern times. Once Chaplin goes off the deep end, he can't stop tightening the nuts and the bolts outside of the factory that he does inside of the factory. The same way Buster is becoming like a machine himself. He can't stop proposing, and he's going to continue to do that for much of the rest of the movie. Here, he's about to propose to
Louise Brooks lookalike here.
Yeah,
No.
no,
Don't even think of it.
ain't gonna happen.
I wonder if she's possibly Edna Marion, who appeared in Roach comedies with Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chase.
She's the only woman at the club who actually seems interested in marrying him. She's based on the character of Irene Trevor, who, like Jimmy, was born in the 1910 short story The Cradle Snatcher and reconfigured into McGrew's 1916 play. In The Cradle Snatcher, Jimmy proposes to 3 women. All are near Jimmy's age, about 30 years old, and all of them reject him. He then meets 17-year-old Irene, and they become inseparable. Everyone calls him a cradle snatcher. Jimmy really does come to love Irene and lets the deadline to inherit his money, his 30th birthday, pass, so as to prove he marries her for love and not money. McGrew would let no such thing take place in his play. There, Jimmy considers marrying her to bail out his friend from bankruptcy. Keaton, of course, uses this version of the Irene character, who is revealed to be a parody of Mary Pickford with her curls and dress, only so long as it takes to create a little bit more humiliation for poor Jimmy. As they mock the cradle snatcher, we have come to the end of the play's Act 2. Here we again see the hired man. Keaton, in his autobiography, wrote, "Those early years of the century were a time of widespread racial and religious prejudice in America, but the last place to look for that, either then or now, was show business." For the most part, Keaton did not seem to be consciously or intentionally racist in his interviews or in his films, but as a man and artist of his times, he did mirror the racism that was then and now still deeply ingrained in our social and cultural language.
His ingenious gag sequence here is reminiscent of one that Keaton did in Three Ages with Wallace Beery in the parallel car. In that one, the car falls apart. Here, he crashes into a tree. But they somehow they are related.
It's all because he's not watching really where he's driving.
Right.
And the effect is that his car is totaled and he can no longer use it, and he's really now at the mercy of the plot and the story. Now Billy and the lawyer are carrying through with their idea to really find him a bride, and of course Buster, as a kind of a human farce machine at this point, is not going to stop proposing. And here's another ethnic reference.
I think this one actually is often identified as offensive in a Semitic way, but I think you were right in that it has more to do with the fact that she speaks another language.
Right. And here again, here's speaking of another reference, here's a woman who looks like a woman and is kind of attractive, and
now we're in Harold Lloyd territory again.
And of course, but this is not necessarily a rejection. We have to remember that there are anti-miscegenation laws where it was illegal for whites and blacks to marry. And again, these gags are not things that Keaton won't do. He's not rejecting, it's things he can't do. For example, he can't marry an inanimate object. He just learns that right now.
Sure.
But he's not going to stop proposing or looking for proposees. So of course he's going to test it out, what he just saw, and of course and this is the farce machine. It's not a question of narrative anymore. It's just, it really, you talk about 7 chances, and it's like a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
And it's, as we saw on the high sign,
Yeah.
It's a little rigged, but he can't stop shooting. Again, it's not what he won't, it's what he can't. This is going to involve the joke about there's a payoff at the end, but he sees a poster of a woman who's appearing in the theater. He bribes the guard to let him in. It's all right. And here's the payoff. Appearing is Julian Eltinge, who was a very famous female impersonator.
Indeed.
Someone who Keaton probably was friends with in real life, but of course for Jimmy Shannon, he now sees that the person he proposed to and maybe made a move on was in fact a man. So nothing is sacred. Everything is a little bit of a target. If again, this is a shooting gallery in terms of looking for gags.
It's also it's a number of these things, the Eltinge things, the racial things. It actually is one of the few Keaton films that is quite topical and isn't doesn't have the timelessness in certain ways as some of his other pictures.
We finally see the article that Billy has contributed to the newspaper. Wanted a bride. All he needs is a bride. We learn that Jimmy's grandfather is named Jabez Shannon, and that Snitz the lawyer's character is named Caleb Pettibone. And everyone else who reads this paper learns that Jimmy needs to be married today, and this will bring out a number of prospective brides who want to help him inherit his $7 million.
Which in 2011 dollars would be over $90 million in buying power.
So no one can blame anyone for anything that happens in this movie.
90 million would be a mighty powerful amount of buying power there.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay, so which brings Jimmy into the church, and this is an iconic scene, and it'll lead to some indelible images that we've seen before in clips, etc., and seen in other movies.
Robert Youngson used it in Four Clowns, right? And he probably began somewhere in this area.
We see how Jimmy's got everything figured out. He's got one ticket that goes to a honeymoon, and he's got another one where
he's
they
going
can
to
get
for
a divorce or annulment. Everything is planned, and it's. I mean, he's a businessman. And of course, what we start seeing here are the different prospective brides who've read the paper, who are intrigued by the idea of 90.
and we're seeing his exhaustion, actually.
It's finally catching up with him, and he's going to lay down and not really see what's happening. And what we, of course, now he's still proposing. He can't stop proposing. He's still in his sleep. And what we see happening is very interesting, and it's kind of comparable in a way to Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Really? How so?
Well, in The Birds, we see Tippi Hedren going to a school, but waiting outside in the playground and facing away. She doesn't see all the birds coming that swoop in and surround her. And a similar thing happens here. Buster or Jimmy doesn't really see what's happening as the brides come in. And I'm not saying that they're birds of prey. Wouldn't imply it.
Well,
and here's an interesting woman. We're going to refer to. We've seen works that influence Seven Chances, play, film, but we're also going to look at films that are inspired by this. And that woman on the roller skates reminds me of a film that you showed me, a Harry Sweet film.
Oh yes, What No Spinach.
Right, and the resolution is that he winds up with, I think, a woman who's on roller skates. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
The service is about to start.
Yeah. Well, your comparison with the birds also brings to mind the double meaning of the word birds. In Britain, of course, they refer to in slang to women as birds. So. I guess that's I like that. That's good.
Now this church also has been seen in other marriage movies. Isn't this a Harry Langdon movie?
His Marriage Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
Same church, at least the front.
And
the exterior.
Here's the hired man. He's he's trying to get to Jimmy and let him know that Mary still wants to talk to him first before he marries anybody else. And of course, Billy and Caleb Pettibone are proud of their work, and the question is that what are you going to do with all these brides, and how do you choose one and But I think logical questions like that don't really exist. This is where it starts getting a little bit more surreal.
Well, the cinema of the absurd.
And it's beautiful. It's just beautifully handled. That's Kate Price.
Yeah, there on the right. Yeah, yeah. It's a reprise of My Wife's Relations. And this is sort of a reprise in that they also got married in that. Well, they're not getting married here, but
well, we don't know yet.
We don't
really know yet. Let's not, no spoilers.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful. It's just the absurdity is amazing.
There's sort of, clearly this is the word central casting comes to mind with this sequence. All the different faces and the makeshift
We're getting a little
bridal
possessive
outfits.
here.
Uh-oh.
They hardly know each other. They've barely been introduced, and again, this is where all the farce comes together, and
Well, they had hired something like 500 women for this sequence.
it seems like 500. I'm not quite sure. I'm not really quite sure how many it is, but that's what it.
No, here we have Irwin Connolly, and Keaton worked with him twice before in Sherlock Jr. and Our Hospitality. He was more prominent in Sherlock Jr. That's probably his largest part.
And he seems like he probably thinks he's solving a problem, but he's actually creating one.
Oh yes. Well, this
is going to rile.
He's not creating the problem, but he's certainly bringing it to a boil now.
Yeah. I mean, they feel like they've been had, that there's a bit of a hoax.
She almost seems like Blanche Payson back there. The one right behind him. I don't know if it's her or not.
I don't think so.
Oh, and here we.
So I mean, it's. It's a fascinating image, and
throwing his hands up in the air, almost like he's drowning there for a moment.
Now again, we're getting business with the hired man that very much Buster could have performed in vaudeville, could have seen in minstrel shows, in medicine shows, but here, of course, this is where this plot thread starts ending. His nightmare. The nightmare doesn't lessen, but Jimmy finally is going to get word from Mary, and he'll understand that up till now he's been running towards something he doesn't know where to run to. He seems like he's running out of time, and soon he'll be running away from a number of brides, but he now has some place to run towards that he specifically knows. That doesn't mean it's going to make it easy to get there, or any of this is going to be easy what comes next, but Buster's going to start doing what he really does wonderfully, which is run and become part of a chase.
But run, Buster, run.
He loses his watch, and now he really is without time.
Well, now we have a series of time or clock gags coming up here.
And again, it's without his watch, without his car, he's really lost. I mean, he's running out of time. Just looking at her watch, of course, everything backfires.
Did women wear watches on their ankles?
This one did.
Oh, okay. This anticipates his sound short, Alley Oop.
1935-ish.
Yeah, educational short that he did. It was just one of the better ones, and where he runs this shop basically with all the clocks that are
a different time.
I
mean, this is a nightmare. I mean, it's a deepening nightmare.
And in an alley oop, plays the part of the
jeweler,
the
guy who sells and fixes the clocks. Right. And of course, this clock.
And of course, and that same gag is in that film where he checks his own watch for time, and then he has to start working on his own. So.
Again, I mean, it's, of course, in the Keaton universe, farce giveth and farce taketh away. Now we're gonna find some giveth as he finds a clock where he can find out what time it is. It's now 6:14. He's got a little over 45 minutes to get to Mary's house and be married. Now, what's going to develop here is one of the classic Buster Keaton scenes. It's the chase. We've seen a chase like this happen before. In fact, we've seen 3 of them in his shorts. In The Goat, Cops, and Daydreams, we find Buster almost as if each of those films leads to the other. He's being chased by, it seems at times, a city full of cops, or at least a lot of cops. And here he seems to be topping that, and I think he is.
Oh, without question.
And he will try to again top this in his next movie, Go West. In Go West, he tops it by creating a situation where he's chased by stampeding cattle, which is a great idea in conception. He was disappointed because he found that he couldn't direct the cattle to really get the effect and the proportion he wanted, but in conception and idea, it's still a topper, still wonderful.
Talking about toppers, this is a wonderful gag. You can imagine his key gag writers, Bruckman and Havas, and coming up with this just brilliant sight gag, blackout gag. Call it a day. Here they come.
While we're on the topic of money hungry, it occurs that this whole conception of the rampaging brides is unique. It's not in the McGrew play, and it's brilliant and inspired. But there was an earlier version, I think, and it comes from a 1904 film called Personal that Biograph made and put out in June 1904. A Frenchman puts an ad in the newspaper advertising for rich American brides. Meet him at Grant's tomb, and he goes there. There's certainly more than one, and they chase him throughout New York City. The Edison Company, seeing how popular it was, decided, well, we could dupe it and maybe sell it as our own, but instead they decided to make their own version called How a French Nobleman Got a Wife Through the New York Herald Personal Columns. It was released in August 1904.
That's quite a mouthful of a title.
And Biograph sued the Edison Company, but that did not stop the Lubin Company in Philadelphia from creating their version, which was called at first, unapologetically, a new version of Personal, but later retitled Meet Me at the Fountain, released November 1904. And of course it doesn't take place at Grant's tomb, but it's the same idea of this. They chase him everywhere.
I'd just like to focus for a second on the character actor that's appearing here, S.D. Wilcox. He appears in familiar face that he appears in lots of comedies. There he is right there. Appears in Chaplin's The Kid. He encounters Jackie Coogan giving himself a manicure. He appears in Feet of Mud, the Harry Langdon short. Langdon punctures his leg. several times, and he appears in some Roach comedies like Birthmarks and Pardon Us, always playing a cop or a guard, something like that. Clearly that was his stock in trade. And we have this sequence here, very funny gag, very broad kind of a gag. This hornet, this angry hornet of a woman is frightening all these burly workmen out of their ditch. And here we go to an ironworks. Jimmy is just running for his life, and it gives Buster an opportunity to show his acrobatic prowess. Wonderful, almost circus-like
agility.
agility.
I mean, and it really is happening. That really is him. He would have nothing less than that.
Here we have Louise Carver. This is her big moment in the picture, and she was a very successful character actress, well into sound pictures, and if you needed that type, she looks like she was drawn by Al Capp.
From someone from Dogpatch.
Yeah.
And again, what we're also finding is that this is, as a nightmare film, this is projecting a fear of women from top to bottom. And of course here the rage subsides
momentarily,
of course, but I mean, they didn't mean to kill him. And it turns out they didn't, so all is not forgiven, but it's forgotten, and the chase continues. And we learn that we've got a little bit less than 15 minutes to get Jimmy married to Mary and inherit the fortune. Will they or won't they? Now, we've been talking about lines of influences, and going back to What No Spinach, an interesting little influence there might be found in a Buster Keaton film at MGM in 1933 called What No Beer.
Huh.
There, Keaton actually channels a gag that we'll see upcoming here, the very famous boulders chasing Buster down the mountain shtick is used in What No Beer. He's on a hill, and he's right behind a beer truck, and all the beer barrels start falling and chasing him down that hill. Clyde Bruckman, one of the writers from 7 Chances here, will take that gag, and when he's working at Columbia writing for the Three Stooges, he'll take that, and for the Stooges' Three Little Beers, he recreates the truck on the hill, and of course the beer barrels chase the Stooges. Beautifully, I might add.
Mm-hmm. This is brilliant. The staging of this, the choreography and the staging.
And I might also add that this moment is something that you'd see in those films like Personal and Meet Me at the Fountain, etc. Very much so. I mean, so it's almost a certainty that they had seen those films, and that's the wonderful thing about Keaton, is how they knew film history, the same way that they probably saw the Georges Méliès film One Man Band, where there are 7 Méliès on the screen. In an orchestra, the same way that Buster would replicate that in the Playhouse, where there are 9 Busters on the stage all at the same time. Boing. We mentioned early on that Buster felt very uncomfortable with making this film because it was a stage property, and Joseph Schenck had bought the rights without really consulting Buster, and Buster and Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and Stan Laurel and Langdon, they were human weather vanes. They were divining rods. They could find comedy out of the air and create it. The scripts stopped them. They found their stories in creating the comedy, and giving them a script was very much like putting them in a straitjacket. So hence, yes, this is this is where Buster lives. This is why, again, better to have to discover your script and the performance and change your story accordingly. Now we're going to see one of the great sequences.
Well, the story, of course, is that he felt he had a dud on his hands, and here he is, wrapping up the picture, and that this is more or less where it faded out.
Right.
And at a preview, people started giggling at this, and they weren't sure why. And then when they looked at it the next day, they realized that they had to do more with these rocks. These rocks
were causing titters in the audience, and Buster suddenly got it.
Saw the germ of a whole new sequence.
And this is the sequence he seemed most proud of. And again, it's because it's what he had said about the way they write comedy, which was to say they wrote the beginning, they wrote the end, and they let the middle take care of itself. This is a perfect example of that middle, taking care of itself. And it's kind of like an opposite version of the myth of Sisyphus. You keep pushing your rock up the hill, and of course in the regular myth it goes back down, and you have to push it up again. Here it kind of follows you on the other side. You're very successful, and in an interesting way, he'll turn it into a kind of a bowling alley, because the brides are going to appear, and it's they're kind of like pins in a bowling alley. And he had his prop people create rocks of different sizes, boulders of different sizes, and
paper mache on chicken wire.
He loved it, and rightfully so. This is about as surreal as you can get, and we know it can't be real, but it looks real. And again, visual comedy, silent comedy, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the logic, again, it may not be real, but it doesn't matter. If it looks real, it feels real, and it works.
Yeah. He might have felt a little bit he was in Larry Seaman territory here, but it doesn't matter. He's doing it, and he's making it work, and his reactions and whatnot.
It's just awesome. It's just
little Indiana
awesome.
Jones going on here.
And yes, and I think here we're going to come to, okay, it's 10 minutes to go. Mary's suddenly feeling that maybe it's not going to happen.
10 minutes to go, but only 4 minutes in screen time left.
And again, this is where it turns into a kind of a bowling alley of sorts.
Yeah, he's having a real little dance there with the boulders. And it solves this other problem. It gets rid of the...
It stops that chase, and it's pure Keatonian logic.
And in a way, the rocks are saving him from that, even though he's in danger or jeopardy.
It's just beautiful. I mean, we just saw a rock hit him, so it's not quite real, but it still doesn't matter. It looks real, and it's astonishing, and we want to believe it. We absolutely, desperately want to believe it. Just as Buster is running out of time at this moment, we are too, and we should mention 3 more versions of this story that come after Buster's feature film. One is called Brideless Groom, a Three Stooges 2 reel comedy that was written by Clyde Bruckman, who co-wrote this movie. Shemp plays a professor of music. His uncle Caleb dies, leaves him $500,000 if he's married within 48 hours of the reading of the will, and of course he's got just 7 hours to get married. The next version is a feature called The Bachelor from 1999. Jimmy Shannon there inherits a little over $100 million. He needs to be married by 6:05 p.m. on his 30th birthday. It actually adapts Buster's version in terms of the brides, and seems like thousands of brides at the end. But it also puts back aspects and details of McGrew's play, an interesting combination plate. The last version is a ballet from 2004 called Makin' Whoopee, libretto by Susan Stroman and Glenn Kelly. It, again, channels Keaton's changes. There's a little dog in the beginning. There are brides who chase him through Central Park, and it's a dance, and it's all mime, and it's an homage to silent movies. It's, I mean, here's a picture. We can see it, but they can't see it. But there's a picture, and he's wearing a pork pie hat. So,
indeed,
in that sense, it brings us full circle. And you can't, you just can't remake pictures like this, no matter how much you try. Keaton said when he talked about later comedians who really didn't have the devotion that he and his contemporaries had, he said, my God, when we made pictures, we ate, slept, and dreamed them. And 86 years later, because they lived their films at that depth, we too can eat, sleep, and dream his movies too. It's when Clyde Bruckman was talking about Buster, what's his secret? He said he does something. He makes the thing alive. And he really does. And as we end, everybody gets a chance to kiss the bride except for poor
Snitz, because Snitz happens. You were talking earlier about mirror bookends, and here we are with the dog, the canine at the end. It's a mirror bookend to this lovely Keaton film.
Full circle. There's the happy ending. Thank you, Buster. Thank you, Bruce.